The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the industrial warehouses of Otay Mesa, where the hum of legitimate commerce masked a sinister truth lurking 50 feet below. Detective Maria Valdez adjusted her tactical vest and took one last breath of desert air before descending into what federal agents called the most sophisticated smuggling tunnel they had encountered in decades. The stale underground air carried the scent of recent construction, concrete dust, electrical wiring, and the metallic tang of rail tracks that disappeared into darkness. This tunnel, stretching nearly 3,000 feet from a modest home in Nueva Tijuana to a commercial warehouse in San Diego County, represented more than just another smuggling operation. It was a testament to the evolving ingenuity of criminal organizations that had turned the underground spaces beneath America's southern border into a shadow highway for contraband, one that federal agents had been racing to map and destroy for over 3 decades. Agent Carlos Hernandez of the San Diego Border Patrol's tunnel team ran his gloved hand along the reinforced walls, feeling the smooth concrete that had been poured with professional precision. The tunnel measured 42 inches in height and 28 inches in width, dimensions carefully calculated to allow rapid movement of large packages while remaining undetectable to ground-penetrating radar. Electrical wiring snaked along the ceiling, powering LED lighting that illuminated the path ahead, while ventilation shafts drew fresh air from concealed surface vents. If you're following this investigation into America's underground drug war, make sure to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments which state you're watching from. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these crucial stories to light. Now, let's descend deeper into this shadowy world that exists just beneath our feet. The discovery of this particular tunnel had begun 4 months earlier, in April, when seismic monitoring equipment detected unusual underground activity near the Otay Mesa port of entry. Border Patrol agent Jennifer Walsh had been analyzing the data when she noticed a pattern that didn't match typical construction or geological movement. The vibrations were too regular, too purposeful. Someone was digging with heavy machinery, and they were doing it with the precision of experienced engineers. The tunnel discovery process had become almost routine for the San Diego tunnel team, a specialized unit formed in response to the growing sophistication of cross-border smuggling operations. Since 1993, more than 95 tunnels had been found and decommissioned in the San Diego area alone, each one representing millions of dollars in construction investment and months of careful planning by criminal organizations. Agent Walsh descended into the tunnel through the entry point that had been carefully concealed beneath freshly laid tile in the Nueva Tijuana residence. The Mexican federal authorities had executed a search warrant for crimes against national health, finding not just the tunnel entrance, but also a package containing methamphetamine that had been abandoned during the hasty evacuation of the site. The engineering marvel before them told a story of patience and resources. Construction crews had worked for an estimated 2 years to complete this passage, operating primarily at night to avoid detection. The tunnel included a sophisticated rail system designed to transport large quantities of contraband quickly and efficiently. Steel tracks ran the entire length of the passage, with switching points that would allow multiple cart systems to operate simultaneously. Federal investigators estimated that building such a tunnel would require an investment of several $1 million, sophisticated engineering knowledge, and a network of legitimate businesses to provide cover for the construction materials and equipment needed. The criminal organization behind this tunnel hadn't simply dug a hole. They had created an underground infrastructure that rivaled legitimate construction projects. As Agent Hernandez moved deeper into the tunnel, his radio crackled with updates from the surface teams who were coordinating with Mexican authorities. The entrance on the Tijuana side had been discovered in a residential area of Nueva Tijuana, just blocks from the international border. The house appeared unremarkable from the outside, a single-story structure with a small courtyard, indistinguishable from dozens of other homes in the neighborhood. The sophistication of the operation extended beyond mere construction. Intelligence gathered during the investigation revealed that the criminal organization had established multiple layers of security to protect their investment. Workers had placed barricades inside the tunnel specifically designed to impede law enforcement, creating choke points where agents would be vulnerable if the tunnel were discovered during active operations. These barricades weren't random obstacles, but carefully planned defensive positions. Some consisted of false walls that could be quickly collapsed to block pursuit, while others included electronic surveillance systems that would alert surface teams if the tunnel were breached. The organization had learned from previous tunnel discoveries and incorporated countermeasures into their design. The investigation had revealed patterns that extended far beyond this single tunnel. Federal databases showed a clear evolution in tunnel construction techniques over the past decade, with each new discovery incorporating lessons learned from previous law enforcement successes. The criminals were adapting faster than authorities could develop countermeasures. Agent Walsh studied photographs of previous tunnel discoveries spread across the briefing room table. The progression was unmistakable. Earlier tunnels had been crude affairs, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. More recent discoveries showed increasing sophistication, reinforced concrete walls, professional electrical systems, and rail networks that could move hundreds of pounds of contraband in a single operation. The 2022 discovery under Otay Mesa had provided a preview of this evolution. That tunnel, measuring roughly 1,750 feet in length and 60 feet deep, had included reinforced walls and a complete rail system. 6 individuals were eventually charged with conspiracy to distribute nearly a ton of cocaine, but investigators knew the tunnel represented just one node in a much larger network. Federal agent David Martinez, a 20-year veteran of border enforcement, had seen the criminal organizations adapt their techniques with disturbing efficiency. Each tunnel discovery provided intelligence about construction methods, but it also revealed how quickly these groups could abandon compromised routes and establish new ones. The cat-and-mouse game had become increasingly sophisticated on both sides. The economic mathematics of tunnel construction revealed the true scale of the smuggling operations. Conservative estimates suggested that a single successful tunnel could generate tens of millions of dollars in revenue over its operational lifetime. Even with the multi-million-dollar construction costs and the risk of discovery, the profit margins made tunnel construction an attractive investment for well-funded criminal organizations. The Nueva Tijuana tunnel represented a significant escalation in this underground arms race. The rail system included switching mechanisms that would allow multiple simultaneous operations, effectively turning the tunnel into an underground highway with passing lanes. Ventilation systems had been designed to support extended operations with air circulation patterns that would prevent the buildup of dangerous gases or humidity that might compromise the structural integrity of the passage. As the investigation team mapped the complete tunnel system, they discovered that the passage had been designed with expansion in mind. Structural analysis revealed reinforcement points where additional branches could be added, suggesting that the criminal organization had planned to create a network of interconnected tunnels rather than a single passage. This level of planning indicated resources and organizational capability that extended far beyond traditional smuggling operations. The tunnel's electrical system had been installed by professionals, with properly grounded circuits and surge protection systems that would prevent equipment failure. This attention to detail suggested that the criminal organization had access to legitimate electrical contractors, either through corruption or unknowing participation by businesses that believed they were working on legal construction projects. Agent Hernandez examined the rail system more closely, noting the precision of the installation and the quality of the materials used. The steel rails were new, likely purchased through legitimate suppliers, while the cart system showed custom fabrication that required machine shop capabilities. Each component told part of a larger story about the resources and planning that had gone into this operation. The investigation team's work was painstaking and dangerous. Tunnel environments presented unique challenges: limited air circulation, structural instability, and the constant threat that the criminal organization might attempt to collapse the passage to prevent evidence recovery or to harm pursuing agents. Every step required careful documentation and safety protocols that slowed the evidence-gathering process. Federal authorities had learned from previous tunnel investigations that speed was crucial once a discovery was made. Criminal organizations typically abandoned compromised tunnels quickly, but they also moved rapidly to establish alternative routes. The window for gathering intelligence about broader network operations was often measured in hours rather than days. The Mexican side of the investigation had revealed additional complexity. The Nueva Tijuana neighborhood where the tunnel originated was a working-class area where residents often worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. Many neighbors reported that they had noticed increased late-night construction activity over the past year, but had assumed it was legitimate home improvement work or utility upgrades. Local community leaders in Nueva Tijuana described a climate of fear that made reporting suspicious activity difficult. Residents understood that asking too many questions about construction projects could be dangerous, particularly in neighborhoods where criminal organizations maintained a strong presence. The silence wasn't necessarily complicity, it was survival. The tunnel discovery had implications that extended far beyond drug smuggling. Federal investigators found evidence that the passage had been designed to accommodate human trafficking operations as well. The dimensions and ventilation systems would allow the movement of people, while the rail system could transport individuals who were unable to walk the full distance due to age, injury, or exhaustion. This multi-purpose design reflected the business model evolution of criminal organizations along the border. Rather than specializing in single types of smuggling, these groups had become diversified criminal enterprises that could adapt their operations based on market demands and law enforcement pressure. Agent Walsh reviewed intelligence reports that suggested the Nueva Tijuana tunnel was part of a broader infrastructure development program by criminal organizations. Similar construction activity had been detected in other border regions, indicating a coordinated effort to establish multiple underground routes that could serve as backup systems if primary tunnels were discovered and shut down. The sophistication of the tunnel's construction had required coordination with legitimate businesses on both sides of the border. Construction materials, heavy equipment, and professional services couldn't be obtained without leaving traces in commercial databases and transportation records. Federal investigators were working to trace these supply chains and identify businesses that might have unknowingly supported the tunnel construction. Some businesses had clearly been complicit in the operation, providing specialized services or materials while knowing their intended use. Others appeared to have been deceived through front companies and false documentation. Separating willing participants from unknowing victims would require extensive financial analysis and investigation of business relationships that could take months to complete. The psychological impact of tunnel discoveries on border communities was profound but often overlooked. Residents of neighborhoods like Nueva Tijuana lived with the constant uncertainty of not knowing what was happening beneath their feet. The discovery of a major smuggling tunnel inevitably brought increased law enforcement attention to areas where residents were already struggling with economic hardship and social challenges. Children in the neighborhood had grown up seeing unusual construction activity, but learning not to ask questions. Parents faced the difficult balance of keeping their families safe while maintaining the economic relationships that allowed them to survive in communities where criminal organizations wielded significant influence. The federal response to tunnel discoveries had evolved to include community engagement efforts designed to provide residents with safe ways to report suspicious activity. However, the effectiveness of these programs was limited by the very real dangers faced by individuals who were perceived as cooperating with law enforcement. As Agent Hernandez prepared to exit the tunnel system, he reflected on the broader implications of what they had discovered. This single tunnel represented years of planning, millions of dollars in investment, and a level of organizational sophistication that challenged traditional assumptions about criminal operations along the border. The tunnel would be filled with thousands of gallons of concrete within days, rendering it permanently unusable. But investigators knew that somewhere else along the 954-mile border, other tunnels were already under construction. The criminal organizations had demonstrated their ability to adapt and evolve faster than law enforcement could respond. The economic incentives driving tunnel construction remained powerful. Federal data indicated that most illicit drugs continued to be smuggled through official ports of entry rather than between them, but tunnels provided criminal organizations with alternative routes that could operate independently of surface security measures. The combination of high profits and multiple backup systems created a resilient smuggling network that could absorb losses and continue operating even when individual tunnels were discovered. Federal Agent Martinez stood at the surface entrance, watching as Mexican authorities prepared to seal the Tijuana side of the tunnel. The coordination between American and Mexican law enforcement had improved significantly over the past decade. But the criminal organizations they were fighting had also become more sophisticated in their cross-border operations. The investigation had revealed that the tunnel's construction had employed workers from both sides of the border, with specialized teams responsible for different phases of the project. Excavation crews had worked on the Mexican side, while electrical and rail installation teams had operated primarily on the American side. This division of labor had helped compartmentalize the operation and reduce the risk that any single arrest would compromise the entire project. As the concrete trucks arrived to begin the sealing process, Agent Hernandez knew that this tunnel represented both a victory and a reminder of the challenges ahead. The criminal organizations behind these operations possessed resources, planning capabilities, and technological sophistication that rivaled legitimate businesses. They had turned the underground spaces beneath America's border into a battlefield where the stakes were measured in both human lives and billions of dollars in illegal commerce. The silence that settled over the Nueva Tijuana neighborhood as law enforcement vehicles departed would be temporary. In communities along the border, the struggle between legitimate economic activity and criminal enterprise continued every day, often invisible to outsiders, but shaping the daily reality of families trying to build safe and prosperous lives in the shadow of America's most contentious boundary. The tunnel beneath Otay Mesa had been neutralized, but the network it represented remained active. Somewhere else along the border, construction crews were already breaking ground on the next underground highway, equipped with lessons learned from this discovery, and determined to stay one step ahead of the federal agents who would inevitably come looking for them. Detective Valdez emerged from the tunnel into the desert evening, knowing that this investigation would continue in new locations and with new techniques. The underground war for control of America's southern border was far from over. It had simply moved to a different battlefield, 50 feet beneath the surface, where darkness provided cover for operations that would ultimately surface in communities across the United States.